Yeah, I'm going to record.
Yeah, you can, listen to it before bed or something.
Yeah, I will.
You don't put people to sleep.
All right. I doubt that this would put anybody to sleep, but it is uneven how though people listen sometimes. I teach a class and I got 12 students, and 6 of them are listening clearly and 6 of them clearly are not. So I wonder if I'm just not speaking to them properly.
So much going on the other side, probably.
Yeah. All right. Well, like I said, I think today let's give it to 10:05. So let's just give it like 2 more minutes. If people are online already, my apologies for the confusion with the link. It looks like the system didn't send it out in advance like it was supposed to, so I had to manually send it out this morning. We'll work on a fix for that for the next one, so that doesn't happen again. But given that happened, I'd just like to wait another 2 minutes to 10:05 for people to be able to double check their emails. We are recording this session, and we will have the slides available. Is that correct, Fernanda and Rebecca?
Yeah.
Great. So we will have those slides available for everybody. So if you bear with us, just give us another 120 seconds for people to file in, and then we can get started.
Step out, Mark. We are going to become the host, right?
Pardon?
Once you step out, we are going to become the host, right?
No, I'm going to leave it on. I have to leave it on because the account is linked to this. I'll just leave my computer here with it running.
Oh, good. Okay.
No problem. Okay.
Yeah. I guess I don't think you should have any complications. The only thing I think I can do that you can do is mute people, but so you always have to ask them to mute.
It would be better to everyone to be muted so we don't echo each other.
Yeah. Looks like it's 10:05.
Yeah.
All right. So everybody, welcome. You are attending How to Talk So They Will Listen, presented by Sasko River Center and moderated by Fernanda Couto and Rebecca Campbell. I guess alphabetically it would have been reversed. Sorry. Not sure if you guys are going to stand on pretense, but nonetheless, Fernanda and Rebecca are superstars that work for Sasko River, and they have a lot of information about this topic. So I'm going to pass it on to them to allow them to introduce themselves and the topic a little bit. Actually, are you sharing the screen right now? I can't tell.
Yeah, let me share the screen.
Well, before you share the screen, maybe introduce yourselves and then you can go ahead and share the screen. As a reminder to everybody, this will be recorded and the slides will be available to you after the fact. I'll send that out so hopefully by tomorrow at the latest. All right, so with that, Fernanda, Rebecca?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Fernanda Couto. I'm a mental health counselor working with Sasko since last fall. It was a fun way to begin working someplace new on Zoom, but it's been great. I am a clinical psychologist back in Brazil, but I've been in the US for 20 years and been working with preteens, teens like middle school age, and now up to young adults. And I used to work for a middle school in Manhattan, so I have plenty of all the ends. Plus, I am a mom of a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old. So sometimes I have to remind myself how to talk to them so they will listen. So welcome.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Campbell. I have my training in social work and attended as well a psychoanalytic institute in New York City for children and adolescents. I've been working with SASCO for about a year and a half. And prior to that, as a psychotherapist, and prior to that, I've worked in Wilton High School, the Fairfield Public Schools, and had my own private practice. And like Fernanda, I have some teenagers. And like Fernanda, I often have to remind myself to go back to basics as well. It's easy for us to tell you what to do in this controlled environment, but you all just need to breathe. So I think I'm going to start off by talking. So Fernanda can start sharing her screen.
Yep.
And I think what we're going to do is we're going to, if people have questions, if you just want to type it into the chat, and then we thought at the end we could entertain the questions. So hope that works for everyone. So I for some reason can't get, oh, there it is. Okay. Adolescent development. This is where we're going to start. So I think it's important before we talk about how to talk so they'll listen is to understand where your child is today developmentally, which would be in the adolescent identity versus role confusion section of this wheel that was developed by a psychoanalyst by the name of Erik Erikson back in the 1950s. And it lays out the developmental stages. And I think prior to digging in a little bit to adolescence, it's just good to know about the school age piece that kind of comes before adolescence. Kind of the idea is that you negotiate these stages with relative success to move on to the next one in an integrated way. So the middle school aged, the school age rather is beyond middle school. It's like ages 5 to 11, and that's really, our children's minds develop, and this is a time in the school age where kind of their blinders come off. They played a lot in preschool. In ages 5 to 11, they're in the classroom, they're around peers, they're getting judged. Things are qualitative. People are different reading levels. So-and-so wants to sit next to somebody at lunch. You get picked third for kickball. What does that mean? You start to get grades in middle school. Not grades so much, but marks on your paper in elementary school. They really start to see themselves in relation to others, and they start to ask themselves in that way, am I good enough? And they're realizing their competency socially this way and academically, and their value. And it's a time also where, as I'm sure you can imagine, they start to develop some self-confidence. So negotiating this stage in a healthy way kind of ushers them into adolescence, because they're kind of feeling, oh, that's okay. They're kind of feeling, they're feeling competent, and with competency, they can attempt to, and self-confidence, they're going to take more risks at more complex tasks. So they enter adolescence. And this stage is identified by Erikson as identity versus role confusion. It's really about identity and also separation. And as you're going, I'm sure a lot of you probably have teens, maybe you're anticipating your child growing up into the teen stage, but remembering back to when your kids were toddlers, there was a separation stage. Sometimes adolescence and toddlerhood can look similar, because they're kind of separating from you, going out into the world and coming back and having tantrums. So I'm sure you're seeing that in your teenager also. So there's some individuation happening and there's some separation. So what's really important to know about adolescents is during this stage, they are searching for a sense of self and personal identity and trying to figure out who they are. And separate from their parents. It doesn't mean that they're not going to take pieces and parts of their parents with them, but it's really so important for them to negotiate this on their own. And it's really identity in all its pieces and parts: sexual identity, academic, gender, athletic, relational, political, and so on. And so if you think about it, during this time, the transition from childhood, they're transitioning into adulthood is so important. And in that way, your teens are becoming more independent and beginning to look at themselves in terms of future. Fortunately or unfortunately, sometimes in eighth grade, they're already starting to talk about high school and this is when it counts and you better be ready for college. So this, especially in Fairfield County, the seed is planted early. So they're thinking about it. And aside from college and careers, it also has to do with identity and relationships in other ways, as I defined. And they want to belong and find themselves a place, and they need to do it in their way, independent from their parents. And as they explore the possibilities in these different areas and engage in new experiences, they're going to hook in, try new hats on, regress. It's really a roller coaster. And these explorations can look like branching out into new friend groups, new sports, interests, clubs, ways of talking, ways of dressing, ways of being in the world. And then, like it or not, a lot of them tend to the more provocative ways of exploration. Maybe they're going to drink, maybe they're going to vape, maybe they're going to look at porn. Like, this stuff is really happening, and it's important that parents have their eyes open to that. So, but what's also important is that the parents also understand that this time has to be at the motivation of the adolescents. And pressuring anyone, an adolescent or and anyone, into an identity can cause them to rebel and regress. And this can look like peer pressure. It can also look like a parent really forcing a child into the roadmap, into the recipe, into the lane that they want them to go without listening to their child. So we will talk about how these different conflicts can arise, because the adolescent can be so independent and look like a fully formed adult and then need to go back to the safe base at home, and there's this conflict, and that creates tension, and it can be tough to communicate, which is what Fernanda and I are here to talk about. So and we'll get more into that, but now Fernanda's going to talk about this posing of the question during this stage of who am I. So take it away, Fernanda.
Yeah, so I think Rebecca gave like a great overview to what we would like to, what is our framework, um, and how we understand adult, teenagers in general as a crisis, but a crisis in a positive way, because with every crisis there is growth, right? So they are learning, making mistakes, and the communication with parents can be tough, because you're used to have your school aged child that sometimes would say no, would get mad, but now they kind of become other people. And we often hear from parents like, I don't know what happened with my child, right? That's a big one. So this big question about who am I? So they are trying to figure out who they are, but in relationship with the group, right? So the role model for them, it's going to have a big shift. Now it's not only the parents that their role model. They are not looking at you as the person that can give them some parameters. They are looking for their peers. The peers are providing security. The peers are providing um, leadership, and how do I become myself? Do I want to dress like him or her, or not? The opposite, right? Of course, there are other adults in their lives that play a big role. They start looking for teachers, coaches, mentors, but everything, it's just opening up their world as they go towards middle school and high school. Well, and a big one, especially in a year of a pandemic, became social media. It was big before, and now it's even bigger. It was kind of the only outlet that many of them had to socialize with their friends. So it became a really point of conflict, and we got a lot of parents looking for guidance. What would they do, right? Like, should I allow? Is that too much? um But one of the biggest conflicts and push and pull, like Rebecca was saying, is that the values and ideas of you had kind of gave a foundation to your children. Now it becomes sometimes a point of resistance for them, right? So they start kind of pushing back, and everything that you think is good, they are going to go the opposite way, right? They are going to become very oppositional just because they really want to understand who they are independently of parents and siblings and immediate family, right? I always say that when kids step in, especially middle school, they have this big paradox, which is they want to belong, but they want to be unique at the same time. And I do think that's the biggest push and pull that teenagers start experiencing in middle school, and then it consolidate when they are in high school. So all those things, it's good for you to have in the back of your mind every time that a conflict is coming up, a discussion, an argument, and how can you um, uh, you know be with them without trying to be so um, oppositional. Okay, so now Rebecca is going to take us. Can I ask a favor? If you guys can mute yourselves, because sometimes we get echoes, so, and I cannot mute yourself. So just a reminder to mute ourselves. So Rebecca is going to talk a little bit more of this process of individuation that you see with the teens. And then we are going to go over with some tips to how you can actually talk to them.
Thanks, Fernanda. Yeah, as I mentioned before, this process of individuation can look like, roaring into the world and then kind of like pulling back to the parent to kind of the safe space. So experimentation in different roles that many times comes at odds with parental expectations. I don't know if some people have heard this kind of back and forth, like, I love you, I hate you. That's kind of that dynamic. Like, I need you, I don't need you. Can you please do this for me? Leave me alone. There's just, there's the need to separate. And then there's the fear of the daunting role of adulthood. I had one of my patients, she's a junior in high school. So she's, she's finishing up all the stuff that happens and looking to college, and she's terrified of being an adult. And I said, why? And she said, because I have to do tasks, which I just thought was so funny, because I'm like, well, it was just, every kid has a different understanding of what adulthood might look like. And that was just one specific example, because I think we probably can anticipate other daunting experiences that go along with adulthood. But anyway, when your child, it does experiment in different roles that come at odds with your parental expectations, that can cause conflict. As we mentioned before, with those kinds of different experimentations can look like across the board with friends, activities, behaviors. It's important to know that this is normal, that it's also normal for your kids' second family to kind of become their peer group. So they're going to be doing some of these explorations separate from you. The parental expectations might be around spending family time together. Why isn't my teen spending time with us anymore? Why are they in their room all the time? Why aren't they getting A's? And they're figuring a lot of this stuff out, and it's hard for parents, but you almost have to hook yourself into what's giving your teen that space to individuate and try to make some decisions on their own. I've had many teens say to me, I'm not going to do that because my parent told me to do it. I mean, I had one patient point blank say, yeah, I was going to get up this morning and go to the gym before class because I had a free first. But my mom said, why don't you get up and go to the gym first before you go to class? And now I'm not going to do it. And I said to this patient, well, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. He's like, I know. And it's this innate need to separate from the parent. It's like the parent is almost a reminder of childhood, and they're so put off by that because they have this big role of adulthood coming forward. So, and that kind of morphs into or transitions into the second bullet point, the ambivalence between being independent and seeking help from your parents. I'm sure there are other times when you've seen you've seen your little girl, your little boy, in reemerge, like asking for help or wanting to curl up on the couch and watch a movie, or um, you know moments in the car. Sometimes you kind of see like that person peek through, when, like Fernanda had said, that some parents say, like, where did my child go? But you'll see your child individuate in these ways. A lot of parents will say also, kind of under this umbrella, oh, my child seems so embarrassed by me. And that's, as they're separating and individuating, you're kind of a reminder of maybe how they used to be, or of childhood. And again, it's almost like they have this aversion that they want to be so far from that. I was in the car with my daughter the other day, and I was just holding my face mask because I was going to put it on. And she looked at me, she's 13, as if I had just like done something horrific. And she said, "Why are you holding your face mask like that?" And it's like, it's just how I hold my face mask. But I think she was so put off by the way that I was holding it differently than how she would ever hold it, that it was almost repulsion to her. So it's just to kind of you're not alone if your child is saying you're embarrassing to me or something like that. And that's just normal. And it doesn't mean that you have to accept disrespect. It's just where that comes from. And this way they're testing their boundaries. They're testing their boundaries relationally. They're testing their boundaries by literally testing your boundaries. You're supposed to be home at 11 o'clock. They show up at 11:30. They're loading the dishwasher differently than you would like. They are speaking differently to friends and peers and testing boundaries in ways. They're really, if you think about heading off into the world by yourself, this innate need to know that you can do this on your own, doing this on your own requires testing things out to see what you're capable of.
Mhm.
They have to fail, they have to fall down, they have to try things out just to make sure that they're good on their own when they go into the world. And it's tough for everybody, but that's kind of where these behaviors can come from. And on top of these very normal developmental tasks that can be so daunting and difficult, they're also hormonal. They're going to have mood swings. Additionally, their brains, prefrontal cortex of their brain, is the last part of the brain to develop in humans. And actually, the brain is not developed until you're about 26. And the prefrontal cortex is responsible for the executive functions, which is planning, organizing, anticipating, emotional regulation. So when your child's room is a mess, well, I don't know, maybe they're just not motivated, or maybe they're just having a hard time planning out how to write this chaos in their room. The emotional regulation comes with that too. Sometimes they just get flooded. They don't understand consequences as well, because that really is part of brain development as well. So the process of individuation is tough on everybody. It's so important, and it's also very exciting, and it can really cause challenges around communication. So I'll let Fernanda take it to the next slide.
Okay, so the biggest question, how can you best reach your team, right? Because they're in their room, or you feel like you're talking with walls. I like to always have these three big themes, and we talk a lot about that, Rebecca and I, like big themes around how you communicate with your teams. If you have to have a takeaway from all this talk, those are the three things that I think is the what can help, which is always setting clear upon agreed upon boundaries. Boundaries are really good They are there for a reason. Teenagers need to feel secure, and they feel secure with boundaries. Yes, they're going to test them. Yes, they're going to push back, but you have to have a set, clear um, boundaries. There's connection and there's flexibility that goes with it. You need to connect with them where they are developmentally. So you shouldn't expect your teen to have, a reaction to something as an adult would have. So you have to be very mindful where they are developmentally, and how can you connect with them in a way that they are going to feel heard, which is a big thing for them. Um, and be flexible, uh, because the process to adapt to adapt individuation and trying to set the boundaries around the family values is a different in another family. You kind of have to listen to what they have to say, so you can come to a compromise. So we are going to talk each more, deeper about each of them. So the boundaries piece, it's when we talk about boundaries, it looks very different for every family. It's a very family, each family, deals certain way. You can have a neighbor that is super laid back with curfews, but you grew up with curfews, and you think this is the way to go. Maybe you and your partner have a different expectation of boundaries. This has to be talked in advance. You really need to look and to them as a united front. If you're coming from a family with a spouse, sometimes with if you are a single parent family, you don't need to give you don't need to compromise as much there. But think about chores and screen time and phone checking. Everything that you do, it needs to be something that is already agreed upon. They know what you're talking about. You're not assuming that they know. So this is, and you need to hear from them. Do you understand what it is? These are our family rules, and this is how is it going to be. You need to be consistent, and again, remember, they're going to push the boundaries. As Rebecca was saying, pre-cortex, frontal cortex is not it's not yet developed. They are very impulsive. They are wired that way. They don't think about consequences. And so you need to expect that they are going to make mistakes, and that's okay. You can always revisit too, and to let them know that you are hearing. It's not very rigid, because again, flexibility is very important. Yeah, so now Rebecca is going to talk a little bit more about the connection piece.
So in having a productive conversation with your teen, this is a great catchphrase to also take away: connection before correction. Connect before you correct. So in other words, empathize. Before pointing out what they're doing wrong, try to see it from their point of view. For example, I was just thinking of something like if your expectation for your daughter was that she was to have her room cleaned by Sunday night, 6 o'clock, as Fernanda was saying, you have to be very specific about what your expectations are. It's not clean. She says, you walk in, you say like, your room's not clean. What's up? Oh, I was stressed out. I was too tired. And instead of saying, well, now, well, okay, now you're not going to be able to go to Sam's house tonight. You say, well, it has to be done, by 10 o'clock then. What you do is you empathize with them and you say, I noticed that you were stressed. It's hard to juggle everything you're juggling. And you know, the consequence was that you can't go to Sam's house, so you can't go to Sam's house. They're just going to hear you more, depending on what your relationship with your child is like. If you just notice what's wrong and then go right in for the consequence, there's not going to be room for connection. And it's almost like your child, in general, in life, I like to use this visual, is almost like a piggy bank. Like you just keep depositing positive experiences with your child, and they're going to hear you more, because I'm the mom or I'm the parent and I said so and that's why only works for a certain period of time. Now that's kind of out the window. I mean, your child, for better, for worse, has their own sense of agency, and you really want to be able to have a good relationship with them, to be able to talk with them. So in around connecting, sometimes parents will say, oh, you know, well, when I was your age, to try to connect. And while we do think that it's important to share experiences, it's also important to understand that our kids' lives right now are so radically different than ours ever were. I mean, they go through their school day, they come home, and everything continues. Social media, the pressures, they're just growing up in a different world. They are not you. They are not their other parent partner. They are their own person. So while it's helpful sometimes to share experiences, it's also really helpful to try to understand that your child is growing up just in a radically different place in life than we all were. Um, and showing interest. You know, this looks like if your child is a gamer, you can't stand games, it frustrates you online. You know what? If you're allowing it in your house, go for 2 minutes and sit with your kid and ask them what's going on there, or ask them about it at the you know, at some point in time. If you're allowing it to happen, even if they're on TikTok, you may have no interest in TikTok. You may actually really have disdain towards TikTok because it takes up a lot of your teens' time. Well, it's happening. So get to know their world, join them, show some interest. They may push you off. You may embarrass them by even asking, but it shows them that you're interested. At the end of the day, even though your teen might give off a vibe that says just back away, they want to know that you're interested. And moments where you can actually share experiences and tee up a situation for a talk. You know, it might be in the car, it might be on a walk, it may be at a time when you can say, listen, I know I really want to talk to you about our summer plans. Let me know. I know you're really busy. What works for you on Sunday? Or, you know, it's really important in all this connection umbrella is to involve them in the negotiation, in the conversation. So, you know, these adolescents do have a lot on their mind. They have really busy days. One time it was described to me by, actually, there's a great book called Untangled by a woman named Lisa D'Amour, and she speaks really well. It's primarily about girls, but it brings in the boys' experience too. But these kids, you know, they wake up, they go to school, which looks like a series, this is how she described it, a series of 45-minute meetings, not generally on a topic of their choice, with populations of people that they don't necessarily want to be sitting next to, with about maybe 30 minutes for lunch. They do it again for a couple hours. They come home. They then have to do work on these topics that they're not really so much of their choosing. And then they're still bombarded socially by everything that's been going on during the day. So, you know, it's not like our kids are just out there chatting it up all day. There's a lot of stress, and especially in the where we live, on them. So it's just important to have your child's experience in mind while you're trying to communicate with them. So I'll let Fernanda take it on to, I believe flexibility is next.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So flexibilities, give the catchphrase give to get. So you give it a little something so you can get a little something. I always tell my teenagers that too. You really want your parents to allow you to have Snapchat? Okay, how could the conversation can go that you can give them something to prove you are responsible enough? So there is like this give to get. It really shows, you can show them that you are able to compromise. So if you have the boundaries, that's the family rule, that's how is it going to be here, but it doesn't need to be rigid. Actually, it's supposed to be flexible. You are supposed to revisit the family rules as things start happening or your kids start, growing. I bet that family rules for your 5-year old is very different than for your 13-year-old, or your first child usually couldn't see anything on TV. And I bet your third child can see everything because by then you are like, okay, it's fine, you can go. Right? So we are revisiting rules all the time, and they need to know you're capable of compromising. So they will compromise when they need to. Um, you are allowing them to the opportunity to show their response. So I have a good example with a patient of mine, where the parents were very, they were a little bit more strict with socializing, especially now with the pandemic. It was something that it was very uncomfortable for them. And it was a really big deal of conflict for the 13-year-old because he would in normal times would just hang out with his friends after school, which he couldn't do now. So there was like a big part of my job with the parents trying to find ways where this 13-year-old could find some sense of agency even within their family rules. So for example, they would get mad because he wouldn't want to shower, and the rule was he needed to shower every day, and which is a good rule, but anyways, that's the rule of the family. And he would push back. When I dig deeper, it was not as much as he didn't want to shower, he just wanted to choose what time he wanted to shower. So that's the teenage brain, right? They always want to push back and bargain because they want to find a sense of independency. What can I do that I feel very controlled? What can I control? They can control what they eat. They can control how they take a shower because or go to school on time, and so on and so forth. So if it's something that you can say, this is the rule, we shower every day in our family, but you can choose if you want to shower before bed or when you wake up or when you get home from school. Another big one is fights about what time to do homework, especially because teenagers are procrastinators. They don't want to be, like Rebecca was saying, they don't want to come home and work on the things that they were doing the whole day, and they are not choosing that. There's this big push and pull. So it's a big topic of conflict in families because parents would say, just get home, get your homework done, and be done, and then you can do whatever. But they want to, no, I want to take time after. So you guys can actually talk about it, right? Okay, so you need to do your homework today. What time do you want to do it? Do you want a break after you get home? Do you want a snack and then you do homework? What time that is? And you are always trying to, and you try it out. If it doesn't work, you can revisit and say, look, I gave you this choice, it didn't work out, what can we do better? And so you are choosing them that you can always compromise. If they know you can compromise, they are not going to feel fearful asking you for it, right? Because if they are, it's not that they are not going to do it, they are going to do it behind your back, they are going to lie. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's not being rigid is just a way of you disconnecting from them and they are not going to see you as someone that they can come and actually ask for what they want. And you want that, because otherwise they are going to just do it behind your back. And lastly, Rebecca is going to just, give it a round up about things that we usually, hear from parents, and we will have a few minutes to discuss. Can somebody's not muted, so I cannot. So Rebecca, take it away.
Two doors, the other side, the other.
Before I go, I'm sorry, we can't mute people because we're not the admin. So could everybody make sure that your mute button is on, please?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. In the spirit of being flexible, I neglected to mention something in my last slide. I just wanted to say, which I thought was important, around connecting with your child. I have found this personally to work. Just being, sometimes your teen doesn't really want you in their space, but even just being like to talk to them, just being around them. Like if they're in your living room, even on their phone, maybe just sit down and read a book. Like literally sharing space with them without even talking is a great way of connecting and even starting a conversation. I just wanted to mention that, and to say that you don't necessarily need to be talking to them or at them to be connecting with them. And it just kind of builds connection that way, just to calmly and easily share space. So, Fernanda and I were brainstorming on some common parent concerns. My teen is always in his or her room, their room. They never want to talk to me. I get curt answers. Are they addicted to their devices? My teen doesn't want to hang out with the family. These are definitely, it's all normal. It doesn't feel good. It's frustrating. It's off-putting for a parent. It's all very common. It's normal for them to want to be in their room as they're separating, as they're individuating, as they really want privacy. Their bodies are changing. I hear from a lot of teens, like, my parents say they knock, but they do that thing where they knock and open without even waiting for the teen to say it's okay to come in. Unless, a lot of these examples that Fernanda and I are giving, they're all very normal. But we do understand that there are risk factors that can pop up. There are lots of teens in crisis. There is an epidemic of anxiety and depression and addiction to screens, to vaping, to drugs, to alcohol. And those red flags around those areas of crisis can look like eating habits drastically changing. Sleep. That being said, I hear from a lot of teens, they're just not hungry in the morning. Okay, fine. Are you having lunch? Are you having snack? Are you having dinner? A lot of teenagers still love carbohydrates. But is your pediatrician, if you really have a concern, your pediatrician is really the best person to flesh that out. That's what we always refer people to in the beginning with parents that are concerned about eating habits, nutrition. Sleep patterns. As Fernanda referenced, things have gone real wonky since COVID. A lot of kids' sleeping patterns have been all over the place with not really having to get up for, appropriate school time. Well, now a lot of schools are back in full time. Hopefully you're seeing your teens sleeping get a little bit more normalized, quote unquote. But that being said, this adolescent brain is also wired to stay up later and sleep in. So sleeping can be a battle with teens, but truly if their sleep patterns are, if it just becomes the focus of your relationship, then maybe something else is going on. If their friend groups shift to, friends that you're not meeting or friends that you have a certain suspicion about, that's typically a sign of something, of perhaps a shift that could be concerning. And certainly if their grades are really suffering and there's not a learning disorder happening, or it's not something that has to do with the pandemic and learning online and organizing in that way. So otherwise, these parent concerns are common parent concerns. Addiction is a big word. And I can certainly go over what the Diagnostic Statistical Manual defines as addiction. But, what we say to parents is, if you're concerned about your teen and their devices, make sure at mealtime, there are no screens. Make sure that maybe in car rides there are no screens. Give your family an hour on a Sunday that's no screen time. You just have to figure out what to do with yourself, and your teen might say, I'm so bored. Well, that's good, because a lot of people, adults included, have a really hard time being bored right now. And we need to know how to be bored and just be with ourselves. And a teen isn't going to want to hang out with the family. That's really, unfortunately, what can happen during these years, is they want to separate. But you can ask them what kinds of, is there a favorite restaurant you want to go to? Or you have everybody in the family choose, take turns. So that's just the way that your family works, and the teenager has to flex to it. But forced family time sometimes doesn't go well. So that's always good to keep in mind. So I think at this time, I feel like I've talked a lot. We thank you so much for your attention and participation. We would love to see if anybody has any questions, if you want to put them
here in the chat.
Yeah.
No, we don't have anyone, but if anyone wants to, we have like 15 minutes to answer any questions, or if you want to make any comments, anything, it's welcome.
Are we allowed to unmute ourselves?
Oh, hi.
Yeah.
Lisa.
Yeah, that's great.
How are you? Nice to see you, Fernanda.
Nice
I'm so disappointed.
Oh.
I just jumped on because I just had a 5:04 meeting that went really long. So I just wanted to, first of all, thank you for doing this. Is it going to be recorded? Was there a recording that I can watch at a later date?
Yes, we recorded.
Thank you so much.
And
I will look forward.
I think Mark is going to send a link of the recording. Yeah.
Great. I wanted to make sure that I jumped on so that you guys had me registered so that I could get a recording.
Yes.
But thank you. I'm sure this was terrific. I look forward to seeing it.
Janet is asking, does birth order affect how teens retreat from the family? Oh, that's a good one. You want to take it away, Rebecca? That's fun.
There's theories around that. As Fernanda was saying, they typically the older ones can be seen almost, they're paving the way.
Yeah.
They're trying things out first. The parents are a little more anxious. There might be a little bit more of this, a little bit more but every kid is wired differently. And you may see the older one being more cautious and not pushing against the boundaries because the parents really keep them tight, versus the second one might be like, I'm out of here. Like I'm exposed to more because of my older brother or older sister, and I want to try this on the side. They kind of have a visual. It's almost like they're the goalie and the rest of the field's out there. But there's no science around it that I know about. It really has to do with relationally, because then there may be a 2-year gap, there may be a 3-year gap, there may be, that's important too, because some kids that are born 4 or 5 years later kind of feel like they're having their own only child experience as well. So I don't know, Fernanda, you want to contribute to that?
No, I agree with you. And I had, parents coming because their middle child was someone that it was kind of lost in the shuffle. But then sometimes you can have a younger child or an older child. I don't think it matters the birth order. It's more of a personality, I think.
Yeah.
Of it, withdrawing and not more than birth order, I would think. Another question that there's in the chat is, I struggle with knowing whether my son is actively listening, which is a good one. He has some ADHD and mild ASD, which is a spectrum disorder. So he often needs to be fiddling or looking away in order to listen. However, that tends to make staying patient difficult. I guess having him repeat what was heard. Um, yes, I do think, and sometimes I do have, even to my husband, sometimes I have to say, did you just hear what I said? Repeat back to me, because I know he was not paying attention. So it's a good way for you to make sure that they are listening, and that they are listening, like you said, actively listening. They heard what you were asking, which sometimes is different, right? That they could interpret anyway.
And it's important that your son fidgets, because it's almost like his brain is moving and all over the place. And if he's fidgeting, it's almost like helping his brain regulate as his body is regulating. There's sometimes a sensory component too to some of these struggles and disorders that our kids have.
Right.
So I hope that was, and yeah, it probably, Karen, requires for you to take some deep breaths and be
Right.
patient.
And I think that is a big one for teachers in classrooms too, because they feel the kids are doodling, or that they are like, tapping, and that's distracting, and they think they are not, paying attention. But some kids are wired that way. They need to. Sometimes I make the metaphor about your brain is the computer, and if you're not motivated enough, right, it goes like to sleep mode. So you need to shake the mouse again, so you can get a little bit more of input. And I think some kids need that, the fidgeting, the tapping, and like the sensory, which is okay.
Listen.
Yeah.
So can you give any guidance on how parents can wrap their minds around their adolescent becoming sexual beings and finding it hard dealing with teen dating relationships? Yes.
Yeah, big one.
Guidance on how to wrap your mind around it. Really, I guess trying, it's tough because a lot of these dating relationships happen on their phones and on social media. So I'm not sure. They are pretty sexual, pretty fast generally. And having rules, I guess, in your house about, I don't know if you have a basement, do they go, where is appropriate for your teen to hang out? And on there, as Fernanda was giving an example about, a child doing their homework and you getting involved as to what time, I was thinking to myself, like, generally, like, one of my kids has never really given me a reason to mistrust him. So I just have kind of let him, he gets his homework done, he does things responsibly. I kind of know what's going on. I check his phone, but if they don't give you a reason to be on them, to be in their stuff, you can kind of let them navigate. So one of my other kids is different, however, but I guess my point being that I think you want to give your kids privacy on their screens to a certain extent, unless you're starting to see something that looks, or you sense something that feels like a risk factor. But it's to the extent that you can communicate with your teen around how they're spending their time with whoever they're dating. And certainly a lot of these kids are there's a lot of sexual fluidity out there, gender fluidity. I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about as well, but just really trying to be open to possibilities and trust with your teen. I don't know, Fernanda.
I always say to parents, it's sexual relationships are human relationships, right? So it's something that is going to happen, and you want, at least that child becomes, it has a very positive relationship with sexuality in general, sexuality as in an umbrella term, right? So I always say you need to be that person, again, the flexibility, right? Or the connection. You want to be that person that your kid is going to be comfortable coming if there's something really big or something that they are not sure. I always tell my own kids, I say, your peers think they know a lot, but they don't. The same experiences of life that you have, they have, even if sometimes they say they don't, but that's what is going on. Offer information that you can kind of let me back a little bit. You want to control the narrative, right? So you want to be the one telling them, what do you think about sex? What do you think about sexual relationships? What do you think about intimacy, which is very different than sex acts, right? And what do you want? You want to talk about consent, which is a really big one nowadays, both for boys and girls. You want to be the one, information they can get anywhere. It's on their phones, right? They can go, and the internet is vast, and the internet is you cannot control what type of information you get there. So you want to be the one, being comfortable talking about those things, even if sometimes you're like, I don't want to talk about that, that's disgusting, ew. That's okay. If enough you repeat, enough you are giving, a sense that you are okay talking about it. If you are okay talking about it, even if it's awkward, they are going to be okay talking with you about it. And always having that open dialogue. And I think that's a big one. They are going to be curious, and there's a lot out there. So you want to be the one giving the information, like controlling the narrative, right? You want to be, because of your own values, because of your own family values and all of that. So that's I always say that to parents. It's never early to begin having talks, I think, about that.
Yeah, I agree with Fernanda, and I think that I brought it up earlier. It always shocks me when I say it out loud, but pornography is really it. A lot of kids look at it and watch it. It's out there, and having that, to Fernanda's point, having that conversation with your teen that is not consent, that is not what intimacy looks like, is a really, I had that with my
reality,
teenager, and it was awkward, but I had it. And to Fernanda's point too, you want to be able to have an open conversation, and they may shut you down, or they may say this is really uncomfortable. That's fine, but you're showing them that you are available to them, and that you're interested, and that you're concerned. Because I've also had teens say to me, my parents don't care when I come home. They must really not care about me. So if you put it out there, all the conversations that you feel like you need to have, even if they're not giving it back to you, they know that you care and that you're a resource for them. So I think our time is up.
Yes. I don't know if we answered BA's question, but I think that's it. And we are right about time. So if you guys don't have any more pressing questions, this was great. Thank you so much for your time.
Well,
I know everyone is pressing time, and we are definitely going to send recordings for whoever was not here. And we hope to see you guys on other presentations.
Yes, please join us again. Maybe in person sometime soon.
Oh, right. Yes, definitely.
By the way, I was able to follow along from my phone, so that was great. That was actually very personally informative as well. So excellent job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.